So good afternoon to each one of you. My name is John Chatanat. I am coming from the Indian Social Institute. I am the Vice President and also the Research Director. And before that I was teaching in the college, Vidya Jyoti College of Theology. Today we have the topic, the role of the civil society and the NGOs in the societal change and the transformation process. When we look at a topic like this or any topic, as a method we could think of starting with the phrase at the end. We have the two phrases as a subtitle here, the transformation process and the social change. I'm looking at the role of the civil society and the NGOs in the social change, in the societal change and the transformation process. So as you see, there are 5 areas that I will be touching at on this topic. First, I will look at the title itself. Then secondly, I will look at the NGOs. That means it is the role of the civil society and the NGO in the process of transformation, in the process of the social change. So the NGOs and the civic associations, their importance, their role and so on. And the third part is the context of this social change and the role of the NGOs, the origin of the NGOs and the context and so on. The fourth aspect will be the role and the necessity of this NGOs and of course the transformation process. The last and the concluding part, the fifth part, the prophetic role of the NGOs, the prophetic role and the challenges that they are facing today, and also then we will end and we will conclude. So totally about an hour. I hope by kind of 50-55 minutes I will explain things, and then at the end we can have a little bit of conversation, a few questions. We can have a little conversation at the end. Let me look at the title itself. There are 3 important phrases here. One is NGO, second is the social change, the societal change, then the third part, the transformation process. Just looking at this title itself, change, the transformation process. The transformation process, when we look at, we are looking at the various dimensions of life. It is the change or the transformation in all these various dimensions of our life. We can pick up the 6 dimensions. It is not anything new. I am just clarifying it. We have the social, we have the economic, we have the political, we have the cultural, the religious, then the personal, the psychological dimension. So we are looking at the transformation in all these 6 dimensions of life. And also when we talk of transformation, especially transformation at the personal level, 3 types of transformation that we are talking of. Because when NGOs and other social institutions will come, or organizations working towards the social change, they are also looking at this type of behaviors and attitudes. So that means there is an attitudinal change, there is a behavioral change, and also there is a cognitive transformation. So the 3 types of transformation we are talking of. Just to remember this, we can remember as A, B, and C. The attitudinal change, the behavioral change, and the cognitive change. So when we look at these 6 dimensions of life, and also involved on these three transformative processes, probably at the individual level. There is an intrinsic relationship between the personal change, personal transformation, and social change. See, by and large, the NGOs and the societal organizations or the social institutions, organizations, they work on the social level, of the civil society. But at the same time, there is an intrinsic relationship between the personal level and this social level. We cannot simply separate that completely. If you remember what Gandhiji was saying, be the change that you would like to be. That means there has to be an individual transformation by and large to have a social transformation. So there is an intrinsic relationship between these two. The example of Gandhiji, the way he explained the word Swaraj, probably would give us an understanding of this intrinsic relationship of the personal and the social. The word, we can just break it up. You can say it Swa and Raj. If you look at the Swa as noun and Raj as verb, it is ruling the self, the control of oneself. That is the personal level. And that's where Gandhiji always insisted. Any transformation, any change, we have to really give a lot of emphasis on this first part. It is a ruling the self. I have to rule myself before I can think of even ruling our society, ruling the country. So the control of oneself, that is the personal level. That is the Swa as noun and Raj as verb. Now we can look at Swa as adjective and Raj as a noun. That means it is one's own country. It is independence. It is freedom. That is at the social level. So these two are intrinsically related when we look at any transformative process. So I'm just giving as a sort of an introduction that though we are going to emphasize now on the social level, at the same time at the back of it, we should not forget that there are personal elements involved here. So when we look at these NGOs and the civic organizations, I am moving into the second part. The NGO, they are described by the World Bank as something like this. Private organizations that pursue activities to relieve suffering, promote the interests of the poor, protect the environment, provide basic social service, or undertake community development. You see the various aspects are already mentioned here. The purpose or the role of the NGOs, the private organizations, to relieve the suffering, that the first one they were mentioning, promote the interest of the poor, protect the environment, provide the basic social service, and undertake community development. So we can see the various roles that the NGOs would be playing here. We can look at three major roles that the NGOs would be playing in the transformation process: the program activities, the constituency building work, and the organizational practice. Now, what do they mean? The program activities, like the social work, they are directly engaged in that. The constituency building work, for example, peace activists, harmony level, peace and harmony fellowship. There are different NGOs directly working for this kind of activities in a society. Then the organizational practices. We have the best example is the self-help group, the SHG program. So these various civic associations are emerging as arenas of collective action by people themselves. So these three entities in which we can see the role of the NGOs. Now these civic associations, they are formally organized entities, the various civic organizations. They are pursuing a wide variety of public purposes. a very much wide variety of public purposes. For example, it is a way to channel collective energy of ordinary people. They assemble and associate with ordinary people towards pursuing some common public purpose in various dimensions, like national development, the integrated development of the place, of the country, or even the whole world. Then community action, to do something with a community. For example, the sports they are engaged in, or empowering the exploited group who are deprived of their basic rights. So there are very many activists, working in the human rights area. All this we do so that we can enrich the people, enrich the life of the people. So based on the different purposes and structures, they can be of different types. So there are different types of NGOs, types of various organizations. There are religious associations, so we have plenty of it in our country. Issue-focused associations, issue-based associations, for example, precisely for developmental activities, protection of the environment, or peace-building activities. So they are all issue-focused associations. Then there are professionals, for example, doctors associations, engineers associations, artists associations. We can see all these different group of people coming together, and then we can have cultural and self-help groups, for different purposes. Or we can have people coming together for doing research, for advocacy. So we can see different types of groups and organizations coming together. The voluntary organizations, they include formal as well as informal groups. To give some examples, I have identified about 6 of them. Community-based organizations, CBOs. You will find that very many in our rural areas. Then non-governmental developmental organizations, because government also is interested in or working for the development. So we have non-governmental developmental organizations becoming a partner with the government for developmental purposes. Then we have quite a lot of enormous amount of charitable organizations. You can look at the hospitals, the healthcare, or the social work, research. Everywhere you will find charitable organizations. Support organizations, they are supporting various other groups. Or there can be network or federations of all these organizations together. We have quite a lot of that in our country. Professional membership associations, as I mentioned earlier. So when we look at all these different types of organizations, we can see their association with the government. The government policy recognizes 3 instruments of partnership. Partnership, of course, in the nation building. The first one, consultation through formal process of interaction at the center, state, and districts. We can see government even appointing committees, various structures, and also there are already existing structures from where they are getting important ideas, and then consultative status they have. So we have this consultation through formal process, and strategic collaboration to tackle complex interventions. We have got a lot of it. For example, even how to control violence in our country, quite a lot of that. Strategic collaborations for peace building, negotiations, we have this collaboration with the government. And then, of course, the project funding through standard partnership, standard schemes. The government also helping in the project funding, and also government helping the various organizations also to get the fund and so on, especially big funds like when the state wants developmental work going to the World Bank and so on, even the center coming and helping out in the process. So we can see these various patterns of organization and entities helping out in the partnership process with the government and so on. There is a move today from the centrality of the governments to the desirability of governance. So you have to move to the governance part. It is not simply the centrality of a government, government for government's sake, having a government. We have a lot of countries like that, a kind of an introvert looking, inner looking state entities. But that's not what people are looking for today. They are looking to the desirability of the governance. They want work to be done. So at the heart of good democratic governance is the role of the citizens and the civil society. So here is where we come into the focus on the role of the citizens and the civil society. So they are at the heart of the democratic governance. The direct reference to this approach, we can see that in the 2000 Commonwealth document on democracy and development. There is a task force report. Actually, interestingly, our own present Prime Minister was the chairman of that group. And I am giving a quotation from that. We can see the importance of these civic interventions there. The civil society is the third pillar of pro-poor development and democratization. Building the capacity of citizens' organizations and a free and well-informed media are critical for promoting citizens' participation. Holding government to account and empowering the poor communities. So you can see the role of this group to what is that towards the government, keep them the accountable, the government to account, and also the empower the poor communities. The poor people and poor countries, for example, are in the best position to understand and articulate their own needs, and their voices should be heard directly within government. Often they are not heard, however, and here political rights and opportunities can be bolstered through community action. So you can see that quotation, we can see that the importance given to the civic organizations, and they becoming something like a watchdog, keeping even the state to be accountable and the work involved. We move on to the context, the third part, the origin of these organizations and the context. It's both progress and deprivations. We can just look at our country today. We can look at the world today. We can look at the context. There are contradictions. When we look at the society, we see both progress and also at the same time the persistence of poverty, persistence of hunger, lack of development, deprivation, the environmental degradation. On the one hand, we see tremendous progress. There is tremendous growth when we look at our country. But at the same time, we see the other side. There are two sides. India is projected today as one of the future economic superpowers in the world. The new patterns of both production and consumption are seen across the country. The waves of liberalization, marketization, and privatization are part of this whole globalization phenomenon, and especially India entering into it from the 1990s, 1991 to be exact. This liberalization, marketization, and the privatization process under the globalization phenomenon, it is sweeping our country today. So there is a feeling that everything is before us, in some people. I am reminded of this, Charles Dickens, the Tale of Two Cities, the first stanza. It's a very interesting stanza, the way he is writing in the Tale of Two Cities. I will just read out. He says, we have everything before us, but we have nothing before us. See, the stanza is right there. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. You can see this is the opening stanza of Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. Looking at the beginning of the industrial era. Just look at our country, and I think we can say exactly the same thing. We have everything before us. We have nothing before us. I'm not going into detail here. When we look at the India of today, and the role of the NGOs, it is to become the voice of the voiceless. One of the main roles of these NGOs. Nearly a third of India's districts are facing growing violence today, feeding on frustrations of the youth. There are security concerns by the government, by the policymakers, also by the public. And we know that terrorism is spreading across the globe in the myriads of forms. But at the same time, we see rapid economic growth. It is associated with growing inequalities. And we can see that very clearly in India. There is increase of wealth, and at the same time, the gap between the rich and the poor is enormously increasing. It is in this context that social changes are emerging. In this context of, we can say let me see just 1 minute. So this rapid contradictions of the economic growth and the growing inequality, there is a feeling of the responsibility to the future generations, and that seems to be evaporating today. So there is a concern of the policymakers, also concern in the society itself. The democratic accountability and also the optimum and efficient use of scarce resources for maximum welfare, they are the twin challenges of modern era, modern state. The democratic accountability, the optimum and efficient use of the scarce resources. So the existence of the NGOs is proving to be a necessity today. So it is not a luxury. So there is, as I was mentioning, the necessity of the NGOs. So the inability of the welfare state and the free enterprise to create integral, just and sustainable societies, promoted by the inadequacies of the state bureaucracy and also the market mechanism of the capitalistic order. These two entities, the state bureaucracy and the market mechanism, they are not somehow adequate today to solve our modern problems. So citizens across the globe have developed organizations of the civil society, we call the NGOs, to help address a wide variety of social needs. So the rich-poor gap, as I mentioned, it is increasing, and here I am entering into the role of the NGO societies, NGOs and the civic societies. I can identify four of these, what is called, the four roles I can identify. Just 1 minute. Before I enter into the four roles, when we look at the globalization phenomenon, in fact, there are two entities that we have to look at. That is, there is an erosion of state sovereign power, and at the same time, there is a weakening of the workers' rights. When we look at the whole globalization phenomenon, and this here we have to address actually these two issues. It is here actually we go into the role of the NGOs. So now I come into the four role of the NGOs So I'll spend a little time here. The number one role of the NGO is the management of the common resources. I will go back and explain each one of them, spending a little time. The second aspect is the NGOs help in the process of self-organization of the society and provide opportunities for the same. The third one is the NGOs keep a unique space between the government and for-profit sector. You know, the government and we can say the private sector, the profit sector, business sector. Then number four, the NGOs enable experimentation and social change by taking on challenges that the public and private sector simply can't or they won't enter. Just looking at the first one, management of common resources. You look at the tribal society, probably we will understand this aspect. See how the tribal society protect the land, the forest, the water and so on. It is all carried out by civic organizations. Various religious groups have come together for the same purpose. When we look at actually after our independence, say after 1960s and so on, along with the state government sector and also with the market sector, we have the civil society coming together, organizing, helping out in the developmental process. So the management of the common resources. Then the NGOs help in the process of self-organization of the society, the providing opportunities for the same. Quite a lot of initiatives have been taken by NGOs here. Their work in the broad array of a field of, say, poverty alleviation, education, developmental arena, environmental work, health, culture, the art. So you can name quite a lot. So that means to empower the citizens, promoting change, there are NGOs working at the grassroots level, very many in our country. So there are thousands of NGOs now. If you look at even India alone, we can see them working in various areas. So they maintain the very character of India, the character of pluralism. So they working at different pluralistic entities, we can see them preserving that plural identity of India. And thirdly, the NGOs keep a unique space between government and the for-profit sector. You know, many of the NGOs, non-profit organizations, they keep a balance. They enter into areas, the arenas where neither the government or the profit sector, they fail to enter. Then the fourth item, the NGOs enabling experimentation and social change by taking on challenges that the public and private sector simply won't enter. If you look at the civil society organizations, they are able to enter and take a risk that are economically unacceptable to business. You know, when the profit goes down, the business houses will start, sending away their workers. I mean, they don't care because their focus is on the profit. And the same way we can also see government. There are areas politically unacceptable. They don't want to hurt the voters. So sometimes common good may suffer there. So it is here that the NGOs enter. Their role comes, and the numerous models of service delivery that are considered best practice today were devised and tested, improved over many years of experimentation by the NGOs, and then they give advice to the government. So according to the data compiled by researchers at Johns Hopkins University, the civil society sector in 36 countries for which they have assembled data represents a 1.3 trillion industry. So you can see how enormous they are. If the civil society sector were a separate national economy, it would be the world's 7th largest slightly smaller than France and larger than Italy in GDP, gross domestic product. The organization of civic society employ around 45.5 million people. That means 455 lakhs of people, or almost 1 out of every 20 employable people in the world they are employed. The data from Johns Hopkins demonstrate that civil society is a significant presence in nearly every country and every region. We can look at some of the examples of the impact of global civil society around. The international ban on the use of the landmines. It was ushered in by a dedicated group of international NGOs. Another example is much of the progress made on combating the spread of HIV/AIDS can be attributed to civil society. Even in India, quite a lot of work is being done by the NGOs. And if we are to save our planet from global warming, I am certain that the NGOs will help lead the way. And quite a lot of developmental work and research in India is done by the NGOs. So I would like to reiterate that we need to hold governments and multinational corporations accountable in order to promote the common good. See, the purpose of a government is the promotion of common good and the preservation of social justice. So the private the NGOs they can keep the government and also the multinational corporations accountable. If we look at, there are a lot of watches: World Watch, India Watch, Asia Watch. That means people coming together, and of course they are watching, they are making them accountable, and by that they can improve the quality of life. For this we need national or even international NGOs. I come to a very important role that NGOs are playing. I would call it the prophetic role. When we look at society, all of us are looking for happiness. Aristotle said that, looking for eudaimonism. We are looking for harmony, we are looking for peace. And I don't think there is anyone who doesn't want peace in this world. But who are going to keep this, the harmonious, the peaceful, harmonious and healthy society? We need a social contract. Here is where I am entering into a little touchy area. I am going to, maybe like a doctor, look at our Indian society. According to me, our Asian culture, our Indian culture is a little lacking in this social contract. Let me give an example. Look at our industrial houses, look at our universities, look at even the political entities today, look at the different groups of people, look at the even transnationals working here. Somehow, I am a keeper of my neighbor, a kind of a social contract. I am responsible also to the other, positively answering the question and honestly looking at who the neighbor is to me, who is the other for me, am I responsible to the other, who am I in relation to the neighbor. These are all part of a social contract. See, when we look at the industrial houses, the way probably the Western countries give scholarships and all that for the students and all that, even running universities and so on, little bit of lacking. It is not that it is not there, it is there, but somehow it's not to that extent quantitatively the way we would like to, that I would like to see. That type of a contract is lacking in my opinion in our country. Here is where the NGOs can become a conscience keeper. Maybe even prick the conscience a little bit, look at by their research, by their activities. So I enter into the prophetic role. That means the challenges that the NGOs can give. We need more committed NGOs and civil society organizations, and we need more of that social contract, because the NGOs can give us a hope. See, they can and they can ought to play a prophetic role. When I say prophetic role, what do I mean? I have picked up 7 characteristics. When I say prophet, the one who can become a conscience keeper, the one who can become a mirror to the society. That means they simply reflect back the quality of the society, the society's way of functioning. They give that back to the society. They are the, I can say, the conscience keepers. They are the people telling, what ought to be done. So I'm entering actually into a value system here. I call the prophetic character of the NGOs. There is a confrontation character. That means when something goes wrong, you just tell them there is something wrong here. We are doing it. It is not that we are not doing it. There is a confrontation character which the NGOs can do, and they ought to do. Be true to the purpose for which you have been put there. See, the people have given a trust. Let us take the state, the governance. The people have put a trust in them. You be our leader. You lead us, govern us, make policies for us. You become a mouthpiece for us. But somehow they go astray. We are all human beings. And here comes the prophetic role of the NGOs, the confrontation character. Be true to the purpose for which you are there. The purpose of a government is actually preservation of common good, the good of each one, and the good of all in the community. So the NGOs has a role to show what is going on. So this confrontational character. Second is the appreciative of good things. It is not that simply telling that you are all wrong all the time. They have to appreciate. So we are all human beings. That means point out where they are right. See, you are right on this tract. That means these NGOs, they have to be very perceptive. They have to look at very keenly to the society. That means a lot of research has to be done, a lot of analysis has to be done, and they should know the society. That means quite a lot of work has to be done in the villages. So that means if an NGO is not getting the pulse of the villages of India, they cannot become a kind of the conscience keeper. They cannot be this confrontational character, and they can't then appreciate it. So there has to be an appreciative role of the good things of what is happening. And the third is as a guide, as an advisor. The government very often seeks this, advisory role. Even if they don't, I think this, as a prophet, these NGOs, they have a role to guide, to give advice. And that is why we have the newspapers, that is why we have TVs and communications and all that is, publications, periodicals, books. We have all these. Be an advisor, be a guide. Another crucial element, if we remember, in the definition given by the World Bank, this point was pointed out. They are the representative of the marginalized. See, the marginalized people, they are weak. They don't have a voice. Even if they have a voice, it is not heard. Just look at their country when they make planning process. Look at our own country. Whom do the planners consult? I can give the example of our own country. They consult the Chamber of Commerce. Have they ever consulted the people in the slum? That is something to ask. Just looking at our own city here, right here in Delhi, lots of people in the slum. Are they consulted? Sometimes yes, but many times ignored. So these NGOs, they become a kind of representing them, representing the marginal people. They are intercessors and representatives. They represent, they plead for them, plead for the people. And they are restorative. So that means they are the peacemakers, and they are the people who give hope. That somehow or other they have to bring and give hope to the people at large. Without hope, we die. I hope I can take about 5 more minutes. There are some challenges that the NGOs can have. What response the civic society receives from the state agencies and from the political leadership of the regime in power. The diversity within its fold, the internal tensions and contradictions. So that means the NGOs themselves, should face or critically face themselves and ask a question of even authenticity about their own work. Transparency and accountability also is needed from them. So we have to go then beyond a charity model, I will call, that means beyond grant and aid to integral sustainable development. That means we have to enter into developmental work and also from there move to a justice work and also to a solidarity work. That means beyond tolerance, I think we should go into an acceptance. And here is where the NGOs can do a lot of work in the villages, bringing peace and harmony. There is a phrase called a word in Ubuntu in South African language. We are because you are, I am because you are, we are because I am. That means showing an interrelationship. And this interrelationship also somehow giving hope. When we look at our structure, our life itself, we have plenty of conflict. Conflict is part of our life. 90% of our life is conflict, somebody said. About 10% of our life is hopeful. But then this 10% of the life should give us that energy to overcome this 90% of the despair. And that's the role of the NGO. And we have the National Integration Council in our country, of which the Prime Minister himself is the head. So like that, the NGOs also can take up work of national integration, by which we can say that we move beyond this grant to development, to justice work, to solidarity work, that means to an acceptance work, so that we can look forward with hope, a harmonious, peaceful country. So here we can see that the NGOs have a tremendous role to play. Yeah, I think we can stop for the day. So thank you very much. We'll see you later on.